Well, hello, that's me again. Today is September 11th, 2023, and if you think that I'm somehow, producing the video and talking to you next day after the last one, and it somehow connected to 9/11 and tragic events of that day, no, not really. I mean, there is definitely an anniversary, and there are many words will be spoken and written about that. And I can only add that I'm not actually inclined one way or another in terms of the whatever theories of the 9/11. So, but it was a tragedy. However, we need to also keep things in perspective, and even despite its really kind of very fascinating and PR scale of the tragedy. I mean, if you look today at Ukraine and many other places, it was still dwarfed by the war crimes which are being committed today. For example, by Kiev regime with the support of the United States. And 9/11 in many respects is a ground zero, literally and figuratively speaking, from where the demolition of what was the best about America which I loved and still love, but it's not there anymore, have started. It was this event which basically demolished pretty much very many freedoms, liberties, and ideas which American Constitution and American cultural and political discourse embodied. I mean, it's obviously it never was perfect, but there were a lot of things to admire. It's gone now. But this is not what I'm talking to you today, and the reason I'm talking to you today is because it has everything to do with the good relation to what I was talking about yesterday and about those data sets which matter, and I am on the record for 18 months now, actually from the start almost of the special military operation, and I was talking this and repeating this non-stop since then. And I'm talking about the fact that in any serious military academy in the world, they will be and are already studying the events of the special military operations like crazy. Serious military people. And I constantly try to single out that apart from the top brass, which is in many countries, not all, but in the United States, certainly are political prostitutes who will basically say anything for their promotion and will come up and just parade themselves as incompetent clowns. But in the middle level which deals with the actual operational issues, which of course translate or basically interact vertically with the strategy, there is a very different attitude to what is happening in the special military operation, and we'll be talking about it today. That is why I'm coming to you today in this manner next day. So there's nothing special pooper or duper pooper, except for the United States obviously desperately deciding now to supply ATACMS, which not gonna make any difference whatsoever, and it's gonna be yet another Wunderwaffe which will be humiliated and discredited. And you know what, I mean, it's obvious that we are talking about the wholesale humiliation of the NATO, not only hardware. Russians knew that it wasn't necessarily that good, but it's the way it was used and the way it is being obliterated in industrial quantities. But that brings us to the issues of SMO, which of course, if you look attentively, here is the butcher's bill for today, and this is for September. So as you can see yourself, there is more than almost 7,500 KIAs so far, bunch of tanks, bunch of the armored vehicles, truckload of the artillery pieces. So the annihilation of the Ukrainian so-called, it's not even counteroffensive anymore, nobody takes it seriously, it's just desperate attacks, basically meat grinder, cannon fodder thrown into the meat grinder, and yeah, it will be, ground into the what usually happens, whatever the product outcome when you get into the meat grinder. But of course there is another thing, which is, of course, I am always kind of have a sarcastic attitude towards any kind of British colonel or general who tries to come out and say that, oh, this and that. But even those people in Telegraph and Mr. Richard Kemp, that he is a colonel again of some kind of UK, whatever is the British Army today is, and yesterday he comes out to the basically realization that the time is running out for Ukraine. After 18 months of war, it is no longer a question of if Western alliance will falter, but when. Well, he should have asked me last year. I would have told him that the outcome was inevitable. And the question is not only in terms of how Russians prosecute the war, which still is not fully clear, and in strategic terms we know some fundamental things, but only some, not all of it. For example, Russians sit in the strategic defense while in reality also attacking across on some very crucial operational axes, such as, of course, around Kupiansk, but Russians are still contemplating what to do with the rest of Ukraine. And this is not an easy question to answer or ponder, because obviously why do we need whatever is the 15, 20 million, whatever is left there, 18, something like that, million of people who are not only freeloaders, they're gonna hate you for the rest of their lives. So how are you gonna approach it? But on operational level and some serious tactical level, not all this bada boom thing, which you have bunch of nowadays the shysters on YouTube and in printed media who talk about all kinds of big explosions and what this battalion went there. This is this type of the minefield. Well, of course it's important, make no mistake, but this is not what real professionals are dealing with. And let me tell you about real professionals, and we'll start, of course, with this. If you go to the United States Army War College Press, you will see yourself that there you can download, and I've been reading this periodically, the very important magazine. It's the U.S. Army War College Quarterly called Parameters. It is a professional magazine. It is written by people who are actually military academics, academicians in the United States. Those people teach in the United States Army War College, and Parameters magazine is a very famous magazine. Russians read it too, so you can always go there and download it and read the fresh copy. Here's, for example, fresh copy from the autumn 2023. It's concurrent, it's fresh from the press, so to speak, and you can read there a lot of interesting things. Some of them, of course, are still delusional. But already some people in the U.S. Army War College, and among those of that officer corps and academicians, they, despite the fact that Parameters also publishes some kind of trash, basically geopolitical trash, they really are not very, many of those who write there are not well educated about it. But there are some things which already begin to kind of get attention of professionals around the world, and evidently they begin to come to the realization in the United States Army War College, and they begin to, at least they try to learn. They're not gonna learn it properly. I will explain you why. But we need to talk about the reaction of this core of the military academicians of the United States Army who look on the SMO and they begin to scratch their heads and trying to figure out what happened, and what they figure out so far is really, really bad news for the U.S. Army or for the U.S. Armed Forces as, in general. And this is important because those people, the same as Parameters, are not being paraded like that imbecile like Farid Zakaria on CNN or some other shyster from the geopolitics. These are professionals speaking. And although I very often laugh at the what is called Pentagonese, it's still worth noting that we need to learn, even using the Pentagonese language, what is the mode of thought, so to speak, of those people, because this is important, and this is important in what I've been trying to convey for the last 18 months. And one of the major articles which came out just fresh is of course called A Call to Action: Lessons from Ukraine for the Future Force. It is written by Katie Cromwell and John Nagel, both of them cadre officers of the United States Army. Katie Cromwell, I believe, is lieutenant colonel, John Nagel is colonel, and they have PhDs and whatever, and they teach in the US Army War College. So these are not your flukes, you know, from some kind like David X, who is comic artist and pretends that because, you know, he been to Afghanistan once, he knows how the wars are fought. But immediately when you look at this, A Call to Action: Lessons from Ukraine for the Future Force, you immediately begin to understand that they're still not going to learn. They will point out some important things. They will, so to speak, note them. They will indicate them. But it's not enough for learning. Real education comes with the internalization. I am on the record. United States Army will not be able to internalize this. But still, look at this, what they write. 50 years ago, U.S. Army faced a strategic inflection point after a failed counterinsurgency effort in Vietnam. Well, it's not exactly counterinsurgency, what was happening there, but let's call it counterinsurgency. And look what they write immediately. In response to lessons learned from the Yom Kippur War, the United States Army Training and Doctrine Command was created to reorient thinking and doctrine around the conventional Soviet threat. And the point is, again, if you begin to base everything you know in war, for example, on Yom Kippur War, let alone as they point out in the text. Today, Army must embrace the Russo-Ukrainian conflict as the opportunity to reorient the force into one as forward-thinking and as formidable as the army that won Operation Desert Storm. Stop here, full stop here. If you look at the Yom Kippur War or you look at the Operation Desert Storm, forget it. You're not going to learn anything because those things have been military anomalies, as any wars in the Middle East are. And I spoke about it so many times, you know what, I'm just getting tired repeating this. And they would suggest, this article suggests changes the Army should make to enable success in multi-domain, large-scale combat operations as today's strategic inflection point. And as I already stated, while they may say and point out some correct things, I don't think so. United States Army is capable of learning this. It didn't learn much in the last 80 years. It will not learn it again. However, having said all that, we need to immediately go into the parameters, which in this article, which they talk about this man. This man is Mr. William Depew. He's a U.S. general, and he's the guy who actually was in the foundation, so to speak. He's the guy who developed and, well, created essentially the TRADOC, which is the command, which is Training and Doctrinal Command. Let's put it this way. He went through the World War II. He was on the staff of the 1st Infantry Division, and he was noted as outstanding staff officer. After the war, he went and took his classes in Russian, and so to speak, he started to kind of develop from his World War II experience this approach to the training and doctrinal command. I can tell you immediately, he failed. Not that he wasn't a smart man. He was a very smart man, and people noted his ability to do exceptional staff work, and, you know, staff officers are a special breed. But the point is, even with his Russian language, he wouldn't get a proper perspective on the World War II first, because obviously Western Allied came to the conclusion of the war when the Wehrmacht was essentially, the pale shadow of itself, and secondly because, as already stated many times, including by such people as David Glantz and Jonathan House, American doctrinal thinking and thinking about World War II was largely shaped by the Wehrmacht generals, and of course Wehrmacht generals have been very self-serving. However, parameters state that Depew should, and they talk about this TRADOC. DPU legacy lives on in two commands today. The United States Army Futures Command has responsibility for transformation and innovation priorities and should certainly pay close attention to the war in Ukraine. But DPU's brainchild, TRADOC, can lead the Army back to the basics of education, training, and doctrine development at the pace it was founded, a pace that drove ruthless prioritization and reassessment. Well, that might be true, but if you remember, I spoke about Mark Milley about a couple of weeks ago, when Mark Milley, for all intents and purposes, expressed his desire to have actually the general staff, not the present staff structure of the United States Armed Forces, all those joint chiefs, all those services fighting for the finances and visibility before Congress. And this will not change. United States will remain military, industrial, congressional media complex. You cannot change it. The power of the purse is with the US Congress, and of course United States doesn't have general staff, and the requirements for the real general staff level officers of officer operators, believe me. And when you talk about this, I can tell you immediately, average general staff officer of Russia, for example, is much more educated in general educational sense, especially in STEM and in military science, than any staff officer from the United States. And that is very important, let alone the way the Russian, actually what you would call the doctrinal approach, is honed towards the effectiveness of the weapons, and of course totally subordinated to the national interest of Russian Federation, which is a combination of both legislature and cultural institutions. United States doesn't have these cultural institutions in its politicum. And so when you look at this, you go into the parameters, and they begin to really talk about the issues which I warned about from the get-go. Now you have the confirmation from American military professionals, and this is very important. And guess what? Do I feel vindicated? Of course I do. But then again, I know what I'm talking about most of the time. When I do not know what I'm talking about, I say that I speculate. And here it is. Speaking about the command and control, those people write that the Russia-Ukraine war makes it clear that the electromagnetic signature emitted from the command post of the past 20 years cannot survive against the pace and precision of an adversary who possesses sensor-based technologies, electronic warfare, and unmanned aerial systems, or has access to satellite imagery. This includes nearly every state of non-state actor the United States might find itself fighting in the near future. The Army must focus on developing command and control system and mobile command posts that enable continuous movement, allow distributed collaboration, and synchronize across the war-fighting functions to minimize electronic signature. And here is the issue. United States cannot do that. The simple reason it cannot do this is because you cannot move your central headquarters. You cannot move your army group headquarters constantly. You can theoretically move battalion or even brigade level headquarters, making them mobile. You still will be visible, and they will still, especially with the hypersonic weapons, you will be basically defeated. But suddenly, what you gonna do with your army corps level headquarters? These are not small units. Believe me, those are large installations. Those are large systems. Well, guess what? You are a sitting duck nowadays. And that is why this is the thing which many of the United States Army, in many United States armed forces institutions still don't get it. That the point is that no matter how you try, you will emit. No matter how you MCOM yourself, emission control, you're still going to emit. And once you're going to emit, and especially when you talk about something which is being formed right now, the fact that Russian-Chinese military alliance, Russia has all what is mentioned there, sensor-based and computer-based command and control, and they develop this what is called recon strike complexes. This is a fully net-centric army which fights and exchanges the targeting and recon data constantly. I mean 24/7, every minute of it. And so how are you going to deal with this? Well, that's the problem. No document, no field manual in the United States Army actually even assumes the fact that you will have your headquarters demolished and you will lose the command and control capability. You will have your comms suppressed. And there you go. In parameters, they finally recognize it and they talk about it. And this is absolutely crucial to understand this because, as I already stated many times, you know what, if you build your assumptions or science, so to speak, quote unquote, based on the actions of General Patton, and you call General Patton a great general, which he certainly was not, or you build your ideas on the beating the crap out of the third-rate army of the country whose the gross domestic product is smaller than the sum of the borough of New York. So it's like, what do you expect? That's what you expect. You come to the realization that you are not ready. And when they talk about that, they hope for the TRADOC, training and doctrinal and futures command lead the way. I don't think so. There is actually American military-industrial complex, which is privately owned, and it will staff, Pentagon with the weapons which will not work, as they are not working right now, no matter how you use them in special military operation. And then brings us also to the fundamental conclusion on the parameters, which finally they come out with something which many people in the Biden administration, or for that matter in Congress or elsewhere in the decision-making circles in the United States, they try to ignore, they try not to talk about. Well, here it is. This is our conclusion on the casualties, replacements, and reconstitutions. The Russia-Ukraine war is exposing significant vulnerabilities in the Army's strategic personnel depth and ability to withstand and replace casualties. Well, I can tell you immediately, the United States cannot withstand casualties. And here it is. Army theater medical planners may anticipate a sustained rate of roughly 3,600 casualties per day, ranging from those killed in action to those wounded in action or suffering disease or other non-battle injuries. With a 25% predicted replacement rate, the personnel system will require 800 new personnel each day. For context, the United States sustained about 50,000 casualties in 2 decades of fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. In large-scale combat operations, the United States could experience that same number of casualties in 2 weeks. So there you have it. Now, it's not me talking about it. It's not some, guy, even the people with such a scale as Mr. Douglas McGregor. These are current cadre officers of the United States Army writing it in the main U.S. Army War College magazine parameters, and they state basically, which is not stated here, despite the fact that they admit that basically, U.S. Army in the real serious conventional combat will be decimated, is because the United States as a society is incapable of fighting real large-scale combined arms operations. It just cannot. No United States state, let alone on the federal level, will tolerate 50,000 casualties in 2 weeks, which amounts to 100,000 in a month. It depends, obviously, it's going to vary, but point is, do you think that United States Army is capable of fighting this? No. You want to reconstitute the draft? Good luck reconstituting the draft in the United States. You will have the political upheaval, the likes you never saw before. And this is what is important when people from parameters, people from the U.S. Army War College talk about it. And this is what I was trying to tell you from the get-go. And there are many people who say, United States in the end will just go and, fight, Russians directly. And the question which I have to ask is, with what? And the question is, how the United States even going to deliver a required force? Did anybody calculate this required force? Did anybody try to figure out how you will pre-deploy your any kind of the armor or motor rifle division or infantry division from the United States Army to Europe? Where it's going to be located? How it's going to, indeed, what will be the assembly area, how it will look like? Well, the answer is pretty much obvious. You're not going to do it without sustaining a defeat even in the preparatory phase. This is not going to be the ability to basically preposition force with impunity while bombing the crap out of such country as Iraq. And that is what I'm talking about. The strategic factor, which many officers, they do not understand, is the fact that, guys, Russians have air defense. Forget about world-class Russian Air Force. Russians have air defense, the likes which doesn't exist anywhere in the world, and you saw yourself already the efficiency of this air defense. It's literally landed what's left of the grounded everything what the armed forces of Ukraine had in terms of air force. And when you look at this, it's just how you're gonna fight, and that's my point. You're not. You cannot fight it without sustaining catastrophic defeat. And now we have the actually official American U.S. Army War College publication which speaks about it directly. And anybody who really bothers to even look at the matters and take a basic, calculator and pen and pencil, they already can see what's going to happen. And as Colonel McGregor today stated, and I trust his sources, that he has, Russia has 750,000 troops ready to go around Ukraine. Why they have those troops there? As I already stated, somebody in NATO may commit suicide and decide to intervene. Then this army will kind of start rolling. But we hopefully will not get to this. And here is also the issue which has to close my presentation today. Of course, it's Tim Buchan's famous The Cost of Loyalty book, which is outstanding book. And Tim Buchan is no stranger. He serves with the West Point Military Academy, and he is not the only one who speaks about it. Hear what he writes about West Point. In 2009 article, Tom Briggs recommended the elimination of military academies altogether. In Why We Should Get Rid of West Point, an article in the Washington Post, he proposed shut down West Point, Annapolis, and the Air Force Academy and use some of the savings to expand ROTC scholarships. After covering the U.S. military for nearly 2 decades, I have concluded the graduates of the service academies don't stand out compared to other officers. These institutions, including the military war colleges, strike me as second-rate. Well, he might be true, but no, you're not gonna do and prepare the ROTC proper officers. In fact, it's especially in the 21st century. But while the current model of the West Point Academy should be abandoned, America is unlikely to find better officers through ROTC. I totally agree with Tim Buchan here. And ROTC programs and other colleges. The standards to become an Army officer, regardless of the source, have been declining for over 100 years, as Arthur Combe and his social scientist colleagues at West Point have found. The standard at West Point and in ROTC plummeted even further in 2000s. As they adopted developmental models in which they accepted deficient, at-risk students for any number of reasons. The number of waivers for medical and physical reasons through which to gain admission despite deficiencies shot up sharply, while test scores, especially the test scores of cadets, on the lower edge of the quality distribution sank. I mean, the scientist's soft words is a sharp point. The officers currently in the U.S. military are not as competent as officers of past generations, and they are not capable. And this is what really matters, and this is what the crisis of the American military thought and military and execution or prosecution of the wars is grounded in. And when I look attentively, for example, yesterday, one of the very famous Far Eastern Combined Arms High Officer School, Military Academy in Blagoveshchensk, held the oath for the new, after the boot camp, new company, 100 plus of the military cadets who will become the officers, Combined Arms officers. And by the way, Blagoveshchensk was also at some point of time a base, apart from naval academies, which specifically had the Department of the the Marine Corps, which is naval infantry. They taught them this. So, and when you look at this, you already know, first, you have to understand that the testing and overall public school level in the United States is dismal. So even when the tests, which are really funny and not difficult, when you begin to fail there and you get into the military academies, let alone the war colleges, what you have a deficiencies. You have a deficiency in the culture, in the environment, in this cultural milieu which grows you as the officer, which in the end has to come through and command your troops. And command your troops, not sitting on the command post, but leading them into battle. And this will require special elaboration on my part, and I will do it. But what I wanted to state today, which is very important, is that here your Americans and American military professionals, some of them are very good professionals, speaking about the issue. And the issue is so severe that at this stage we need to look at the political statements and all this geopolitical game only from one point of view, which is the main driver of the modern geopolitics. It is the formation of the power balance geopolitically, globally, and the power balance is formed, of course, on the basis of the military industrial capacity of the nation. And we can see decline of military not only in the United States. Europe is a joke, for crying out loud, militarily, and this trend will continue no matter how they will try to reform or develop some kind of the new doctrine or approach. And the reason being, of course, that political institutions are designed in such a way as to make profits for the military industrial companies. So, and this was what I was going to tell you today. I told you this today, and as always, guys, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, please support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee too. That allows me to do what I'm doing. And you know what, guys? Have a nice rest of the week. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.